to the next episode of Unplugged by Shape America. I'm your host, Stephanie Morris, and today my special guest is Dr. Tara Blackshear, who is an assistant professor of kinesiology and physical education teacher education at Towson University. Dr. Blackshear also authored Shape So White, which was recently published in Physical Education and Sport Pedagogy. Dr. Blackshear, thank you so very much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you taking this time out to discuss my scholarship and how hopefully Shape America can move forward. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to acknowledge that your research, Shape So White, has prompted many important conversations recently. I am incredibly grateful for your work. I have a high level of respect for it. But first, before we get into that piece, I just want to ask, how are you right now? There's so much that is happening in our world that is incredibly painful and stressful and emotionally exhausting. So how are you right now, Dr. Blackshear?
All of those things that you just mentioned. And I hope that the recent events with the protests will finally, hopefully, move the needle a little bit more towards racial justice and equities and address many of the systemic racism that is embedded throughout our nation. And so hopefully I hope that it is a tipping point for us to move dialogue into action.
Thank you. I agree very much and share those sentiments. As I mentioned, Shape So White has been an incredibly important catalyst in opening up some important dialogue and conversations within our community. Can you share with us what you thought the most important findings were in your work?
Well, I think the most shocking finding was that there were no Black Teachers of the Year at the district and national level for an 11-year period during Barack Obama's presidency, the first Black American president. And so that was quite shocking to me. Many things that are racist or biased, it's like, par for the course. But this one was really, it was eye-opening. And I was gone most of Barack Obama's presidency, living overseas for 7 of his 8 years. And so when you come back, you really start to see more clearly how things have not changed much. In fact, many things had gotten worse by the time I returned. So I think the fact that there were no Black Teachers of the Year was shocking because we actually have Black Teachers of the Year at the state level. And so that was a major concern. I think that was most revealing. I think the second finding was the all-white board, and I think the TOY selection committee. And so, as we know, because of the literature, representation matters. And so I think, and how we think. And so I think having a more narrow or linear view on teaching, it excludes Black teachers, Black and brown teachers, even if the people creating these rubrics and criteria, that may not be their intent, but it's clearly, how I see it, it's clearly eliminating strong Black physical educators. And I've seen many strong Black and brown physical educators in the United States over my career. And I'm looking at, I do have a couple notes. Yeah, so I think no representation from TOY leadership. And unfortunately, well, we'll probably get to this later, I think that is also reflective in many of the physical education conferences at a state, district, and national level.
No, you raise excellent points, and I agreed with all of them when I read the report. I also was really struck by some of the comments that you had regarding the standards. And I thought that was really insightful and something that we should be incredibly mindful of when we go to create new standards. That is additional commentary, and I really appreciate your thoughts on all of that. I was also really grateful that you joined a recent Shape America Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force meeting. I sincerely hope you are willing to continue to engage with us and help us in this critical work. Can you please share with us a little bit about where you see our biggest challenges as a community and where we really need to grow in this area moving forward?
I think changing the mindset, and with the recent events with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and a host of other innocent Black people, or Black people who were doing, nothing worthy of being killed. I hope that we can use this as an opportunity, or SHAPE can use it as an opportunity to really do some soul searching and first decide if this is the direction that current decision makers actually want to go. Is this the path that they want to go down? Because unfortunately, from my experiences, from my research, there are many racists among the group, and they're happy with the status quo. And so I think, as I shared on that EDI call, that I think data needs to be collected. So not at that time, I talked about membership data, but I also think that in evaluation, bias evaluation, what are people's fundamental beliefs on race and, other type of differences. And I think that, maybe exposing or making sure that your board members are aligned with the equitable social inclusion direction that Shape America has professed on, different various literature and media. So I think that data collection is important, not just membership. And then I think to take it maybe a step further is communicate with Black and Brown professionals who are not members and say, hey, why haven't you joined Shape America? And I know that sometimes it's cost, some may not be aware, but especially the ones who are coming to the state organizations, I think that's a good opportunity to collect data. And I don't think people should be afraid to report race and ethnicity if the intent is stated, because you may have some Black and Brown educators who don't want to do that for various reasons. I talked about taking inventory or collecting data on your current membership. And what I want to add to that conversation is perhaps you should ask your Black and Brown physical educators who are not members, why aren't you a member? For some it's cost, for some it's awareness or the lack of awareness. But in particular at the state conferences where you have some representation of Black and Brown educators, not a lot still in many areas, collect some data from them, and maybe what could we do to encourage you to either return to SHAPE, because many were SHAPE members in the past, and what could we do to win you back? What do we need to do? And so I think from there you can maybe get a little bit more information on, are we meeting the needs of the target groups that we are intending or that we're saying that we're trying to meet or reach?
Thank you. Some very insightful thoughts there. It's something for us to definitely think about. What are your hopes for making progress in this area in the next year and beyond?
Well, I spoke with Carly a week or two ago about some of the changes that the Teacher of the Year committee has made. And I think, okay, that's progress. And I said, it's acknowledgement. But for me, those are soft changes. I think that something bold needs to be done and stated on a national stage. These are the issues with our lack of diversity. These are the issues where we are employing or where we are responsible, or we are contributing, I should say, contributing to systemic structures that exclude Black and Brown teachers, from the standards to the criteria of what Teacher of the Year is, to perhaps even recruitment for membership. And so I think that a bold statement. I will tell you that there was some flack with the recent statement that SHAPE came out. I think at the bottom it said Black Lives Matter, something to that effect. And I got some feedback from non-Black colleagues. And so just an example of how our lenses are often different. They were fed up. They didn't really agree. They thought it was such a short statement. But what I took away from it is, I said, they acknowledge accountability. They acknowledge accountability. Something, I can't remember exactly verbatim. And so I think that you do need those multiple lenses, because I think sometimes what a white person thinks is unfair or racist is not. And so I really think that the representation of people who can think critically and objectively to some of the Shape America outcomes, some of the things that we're doing in physical education. So, and I really think that a conversation on if you're not experiencing racism, it's actually sometimes difficult to identify it. However, I do think that unconscious bias, or conscious bias, or little microaggressions, that people really need to evaluate what's going on there, and then hopefully hold accountable and challenge and confront. My experience is there's a lot of complicit racism that no one's speaking out. They're afraid to say something when they know things are wrong.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that. I definitely own my part in implicit bias, unconscious bias, and have had moments of reflection about my own conversations within our community and how hard this all is, but how incredibly important it is. So thank you very much for all of that. Thank you again, Dr. Blackshear, for spending some time with me today to talk about all of this. It's so important. Any closing thoughts for our audience listening today?
Well, I hope that we can start to make changes that are evident, that are beyond literature. Like, not only we've made these changes, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to evaluate whether we are meeting the mission statements that we put out. And I think for some that's going to be great, but you will, as I mentioned before, taking an inventory of your current members, the board, because those folks who don't want to be truly inclusive really need to find another organization. And so I think those are bold moves where you wouldn't have to say a name, but you can say, we've done an analysis and we have found that it's been brought to our attention that we have people in the group who are not aligned with our values, and we had to make some changes. I think statements and actions like those speak volumes. I'm sure you have members in your organization that, why do we talk about race all the time, or things of that nature. And as Kenedra pointed out, I think on that call or another one, well, I'm tired of talking about racism. I'm tired of being impacted by racism. Just imagine how exhausting my life is. Talking about race doesn't fundamentally change spaces that you can gain access and entry. So I think for SHAPE, I think what would be huge as far as recruitment and retention is to make a bold action to match the statements and let it be known, not we're kind of doing this. And then when those folks push back, challenge them. Why are you pushing back?
I agree. Thank you very much, Dr. Blackshear.
Thank
Everyone,
you.
thank you for joining us for this episode of Unplugged by Shape America. If you haven't read Shape So White, I urge you to find it and read it and take time to reflect on it and process it. Know that I and many members of the Shape America team and staff are always willing to have conversations with you about any of this. We know that it is often complicated and difficult and hard, but such an important conversation that we need to keep having, and we will keep having. Thank you again, Dr. Blackshear.
Thank you.